Imagine standing on a quiet beach. The waves are gentle, the sky is clear. Then, the ocean begins to disappear. Not slowly. Within seconds, the water races away from the shore, leaving fishing boats stranded on the sand. People step onto the exposed seabed, curious to see what has happened. They have no idea they're walking into one of nature's deadliest traps. Because just minutes later, the horizon turns black. Not from clouds, from water. A wall of water, taller than apartment buildings, charges toward the coast at highway speed. Entire towns vanish beneath it. Ships are thrown inland. Concrete bridges collapse. Cars become floating debris. In less than an hour, more than 18,000 people are dead or missing. For Japan, it wasn't just another disaster. It was proof that even one of the world's most advanced countries couldn't stop the ocean. Most nations would have rebuilt what they lost. Japan made a completely different decision. Instead of retreating from the sea, they decided to build a wall against it. Not around one city, not around one harbor, but along almost 400 kilometers of coastline. At first, the idea sounded impossible. How do you build a barrier longer than the distance between New York and Washington, D.C.? How do you anchor it to one of the most earthquake-prone coastlines on Earth? And more importantly, how do you build a wall that can survive something capable of destroying entire cities? The answer would become one of the largest engineering projects in modern history. But the story doesn't begin with concrete. It begins deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. On March 11, 2011, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake ripped through the seafloor off Japan's northeast coast. The shaking was violent, but it wasn't the biggest danger. As the ocean floor suddenly lifted by several meters, it displaced an unimaginable amount of water. That single movement created a tsunami unlike anything Japan had seen in generations. When it reached the coastline, it didn't behave like a normal wave. It behaved like the ocean itself had decided to move inland. Old seawalls that had protected communities for decades were simply overwhelmed. Some disappeared beneath the water. Others cracked apart under the unimaginable force. In just a few hours, Japan realized something terrifying. The defenses they had trusted for generations were no longer enough. And if the next tsunami was just as powerful, the country would have to attempt something the world had never seen before. For decades, Japan believed it was prepared. The country already had hundreds of seawalls protecting fishing villages and coastal cities. They had survived storms, typhoons, and smaller tsunamis for years. But 2011 changed everything. The tsunami didn't just hit the walls. In many places, it simply climbed over them. Elsewhere, the force of the water shattered massive concrete sections that had been considered nearly indestructible. The walls hadn't been built badly. They had been built for the biggest tsunami engineers thought was possible. Reality turned out to be much worse. Suddenly, Japan faced an impossible choice: accept that another disaster like this could happen again, or prepare for a tsunami that might not arrive for another 100 years. Preparing sounded simple, until engineers looked at the map. Japan's coastline isn't one long beach. It's a maze of rocky cliffs, deep bays, fishing ports, cities, rivers, and mountains. A wall that worked in one location could completely fail just a few kilometers away. There was no universal design. Almost every section had to be engineered from scratch. Some areas needed walls only a few meters high. Others required barriers taller than 5-story buildings. And then came an even bigger problem. Japan doesn't just suffer from tsunamis, it's one of the most earthquake-prone countries on Earth. The same earthquakes that create tsunamis could also damage the very wall meant to stop them. So every section had to survive 2 disasters. A massive earthquake, followed immediately by an enormous wave. The project became far more than a simple seawall. It was turning into an enormous coastal defense system. But while engineers solved technical problems, the public raised another question. Should they build it at all? Many people had spent their entire lives looking out over the Pacific Ocean. Now those views would disappear behind walls of concrete. Some feared the coastline would look more like a fortress than a place to live. Others argued no wall could ever justify destroying Japan's beautiful beaches. The debate divided the country: protect the coastline or preserve it. In the end, the government reached one conclusion: if another tsunami arrived tomorrow, doing nothing would be the greatest mistake of all. And with that, construction on one of the largest engineering projects in modern history officially began. Once construction began, the scale of the project became almost impossible to comprehend. This wasn't one construction site, it was hundreds. Across Japan's northeast coast, excavators, cranes, and concrete plants appeared almost everywhere. Entire hillsides were reshaped, roads were rerouted, fishing ports became active building zones, and every kilometer brought a new challenge. Some coastal towns only needed relatively low barriers. Others sat inside narrow bays where tsunami waves become even taller as they're squeezed inland. In those locations, engineers built walls reaching over 15 meters high. Standing beside one feels less like standing next to a seawall, and more like standing beside a skyscraper laid on its side. But height wasn't the biggest challenge, strength was. A tsunami isn't a normal wave crashing onto a beach. It's an entire mass of ocean pushing forward with incredible force. To survive that impact, the walls needed enormous reinforced concrete foundations buried deep into the ground. Thick steel reinforcement ran through every section, while massive drainage systems relieved pressure from the water behind the wall. Engineers also knew something critical. The wall could never have a weak point. Roads, tunnels, river crossings, and harbour entrances all had to become part of the same defence system. Some floodgates are so large they can seal off an entire harbour within minutes. Together, they transformed the wall into a single connected shield stretching along the coastline. But building it created another problem. Japan couldn't simply shut down its coastal towns for years. Construction had to continue while people still lived, worked, and fished nearby. Materials arrived by truck, ship, and temporary roads built just for the project. Even then, nature refused to cooperate. Typhoons flooded construction sites. Powerful aftershocks shook unfinished sections. Heavy rain delayed work for weeks at a time, yet the project kept moving forward, slowly, kilometer by kilometer. Japan was building what would become the world's largest tsunami defense system. But as the final sections were completed, a new question began to emerge. Could even a wall this massive ever truly stop the ocean? The answer is no. And Japan's engineers have never claimed otherwise, because there is no such thing as a tsunami-proof wall. Every seawall has a limit. If a wave is large enough, the ocean will eventually win. That may sound like a failure, but it completely misses the point. The wall was never designed to defeat the ocean. It was designed to slow it down. Even a delay of 1 or 2 minutes can save thousands of lives. Those extra moments give people time to reach higher ground. They allow floodgates to close, emergency services to react, and entire communities to escape. That's why the seawall is only one layer of Japan's defense. After 2011, towns were rebuilt on higher ground. New evacuation roads and towers appeared across the coastline. Warning systems became faster. Schools now practice tsunami evacuations every single year. The philosophy changed forever. Never rely on one line of defense. Always have another. And that strategy has already proven its value. Several smaller tsunamis have struck Japan since construction began. None reached the unimaginable scale of 2011. But the new defenses reduced flooding, protected infrastructure, and gave residents precious time to evacuate. Exactly what they were built to do. Still, the project remains controversial. Many people argue the walls permanently changed Japan's coastline. Entire fishing villages that once looked directly out across the Pacific now face towering concrete barriers instead. Some believe the country sacrificed its connection with the sea. Others believe that sacrifice was unavoidable, because after witnessing an entire coastline disappear beneath the ocean, the price of doing nothing became impossible to accept. Today, nearly 400 kilometers of reinforced seawalls stretch across Japan's coast, one of the largest engineering projects on Earth. Built not to conquer nature, but to survive it. And perhaps that's the most remarkable part. The greatest engineering achievements aren't always the tallest buildings or the longest bridges. Sometimes, they're the ones you hope are never truly tested.